Hello, my name is Lars Morrison, and I'm standing in the foyer of Covenant Presbyterian Church in downtown Butler. I would like to take you on a small historical adventure. Hello again. We now stand in the undercroft of the steeple tower. Down here you will find about 40,000 tons of rock, 5 or 6 pounds of dust, 3,000 cubic feet of air, and the weight of history like you've never felt it before. For this was a station on the Underground Railroad. Let me take you through it. The Underground Railroad operated before what I call the Great Insanity. What Northerners call the Civil War, what Southerners call the war between the states, and they're still fighting it. But to me, brother against brother is the greatest kind of insanity that there can be. We had very, very brave men on our session back in those days. Because the way the laws were written, if any church or organization was found to help a runaway slave, the ruling members go to jail and get fined. The pastor or president go to jail and get fined. The church is confiscated. The manse is confiscated. We have nothing. Difficult times. Now, what I'm about to tell you was never written down for very obvious reasons. As they say today, never put something in an email because you'll never be able to take it out. So nothing was ever written down. However, in the early part of the 21st century, we had a congregant here whose name was Lois. And Lois was 103 years old at that point in time. And her grandparents had been with the Underground Railroad and helped with it. And her grandfather told his son, who told his children, of which Lois was one. And I got to interview Lois, and it was quite the something. When we had the COVID pandemic, I was totally prepared, because Lois took me through the Spanish influenza of the early 20th century. So no surprises there. And she finished up talking, and she said, "Can I tell you something? It's a big, huge secret, and you'll probably get in trouble for it, but I have to tell somebody, please." And I said, "Go ahead, Lois." And she said, "It's about slaves." And she said it just like that. And I said, "The Underground Railroad?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Go ahead and talk, Lois. I promise you, the statute of limitations has long run out on that. Nobody will get in any kind of trouble." So she sat for another hour and told me the story, part of which I'm going to tell you. I don't know if you can see beside me here, you'll probably see it later, but we have several reproductions of broadsides. Posters that were so by so that were put up on trees and houses and mercantiles and barns, trying to bring back these runaway slaves because they were valuable property. A slave back in those days would go for $1,000 to $1,500. Now today, that's a nice weekend out. Back then, that's a year's wages for a wealthy man. It would be $50,000 to $60,000 to buy the same person today. So you wanted to keep a hold of them because you didn't feed them very, very well. You didn't clothe them very, very well. They lived in hovels, but they produced an incredible amount of free labor under the aegis of the slave master. So it was not unusual for a plantation to bring in literally $500,000 a year in revenue, which, think about it today, that's a significant amount of money. But the slaves were very poorly treated. They weren't people at all. You didn't have men, women, and children. You had bucks, does, and pickaninnies. One of the bits of economics in the slave trade, you get a buck, you get a doe, you put them together in a dark room, 9 months later, you have one of these. You know what that is? That's saleable goods. So you take that saleable good, and for 5 years you feed it, more or less, you clothe it, more or less, and when they're about 4 years old, you start teaching them how to keep house, how to cook, how to farm, how to ranch, how to work with the animals, and you teach them this for 2 years. Then you take them a few miles down the road and you sell them for $1,000. And it has probably cost you $20 to feed and clothe and house this creature for the 5 to 7 years that you do so. That's a pretty good return on your money. As I said, the slaves were very, very poorly treated. Whipped, burned, branded, abused. It was not pretty. But they were considered property. They weren't human. Even though humans, white men, could obviously interbreed with them, they were still not humans. Strange thing. Having given you just a little bit of the background of slavery, let me take you to a physical location and show you something. A large hole in the church foundation. It's about 2.5 to 3 feet deep. Huge, heavy stones. Now, when we were operating as a station on the Underground Railroad, where I'm standing did not exist. This was built long after the Great Insanity. But there was a small chimney here that was camouflaged, thank you, camouflaged with a flat of just turf. And the slaves would come in at night, and when we brought here, the turf would be lifted up, and the slaves, 3, 4, 5, very rarely any more than that, would slide into there. They would have food, they would have water, maybe if somebody could afford a blanket, they would give a blanket, and then the cover would be put back on. There is no light in there. It's only about 3 feet high. So you are lying in there on your back, on your belly, on your side, breathing, making no sound because that can be heard above you, in absolute dark, with the mice and the rats and the centipedes and the ants crawling all over you. And oh my goodness, what do you do when nature calls and that morning glass of water needs to continue its cosmic journey? You feel your way to someplace else, take care of what you need to take care of, and then your comrades will do this. Now you can't hear that, but in the silence it makes enough noise that can guide you back to where they are. After a day, 2, maybe 3, the north wall, we're in the south right now, the north wall would be opened up. There was a little door there. The slaves would crawl out, go through what was then our graveyard next door, and continue on up to, we think, somewhere around where the old stone house is, near Slippery Rock, which was the next station on the Underground Railroad. Now, you have seen a close-up shot of some of the replications of the broadsides that were down there. And the sharp-eyed people amongst you would have seen that there was one that said Negroes, consisting of so many men, so many women, and so many children. This was the language used by the merchants. Buck, doe, and pickaninny were used by the owners to, again, further dehumanize the slaves. $100 reward, ran away from the subscriber on the 27th of July, my black woman named Emily. He describes Emily, tells what she was wearing, what she took with her, and is offering a $100 reward if taken on this side of Kentucky. But if she gets into Ohio and is taken in Ohio, it becomes $300. Because Ohio was a free state, and if the slave catchers caught a slave there and they were caught, they were kidnappers and could be prosecuted under the federal laws. So this was danger money. Now $300 to us doesn't seem like much. But if I said, all right, $10,000 if you get you on this side, $30,000 if you get you on the other side, that might seem a little better to you today. Caution, colored people of Boston one and all. You are hereby respectfully cautioned and advised to avoid conversing with the watchmen and police officers of Boston. For the order of the mayor and the aldermen, they have been allowed to act as kidnappers and slave catchers. So there were also some very good, very brave people out there helping the slaves get away, Dave.